Welcome back, everybody, to the second session in today's Beyond Clean virtual event, sponsored by 3M and in collaboration with the Competency and Credentialing Institute. I want to give a very special shout out to the staff at UPMC Pinnacle West Shore Hospital in Mechanicsburg, Pennsylvania. They were featured on the video that played between this and the previous session. This team embodies teamwork, they're dedicated to education and patient safety, and they clearly have a lot of fun doing it. Thank you all for what you do over there at UPMC Pinnacle West Shore, and keep fighting dirty. Our next speaker is Brandon VanHee. Brandon is the Clinical Education Manager for Key Surgical. He plays an active role in the sterile processing, endoscopy, and operating room industries as a speaker at medical facilities and conferences around the globe. He serves as an industry influencer with memberships in multiple organizations and focuses on promoting best practice as a member of 12 AMI working groups. This guy has a lot of free time on his hands. Brandon is a dear friend and a colleague, and he is going to discuss the benefits of collaboration in the healthcare setting and provide tangible skills to enable collaboration across disciplines in daily practice. I'm very excited to welcome Brandon VanHee.
Thanks, Linz. I really appreciate that warm welcome. I just wanted to say hi to everyone. Thank you for joining me today at the Resist Virtual Conference, where we are going to stand up to superbugs and surgical site infections. But before we begin, I always like to take just a little bit of time to tell you about myself and my background. And for some of you that I've had the pleasure to meet or that have attended one of my presentations in the past, you may know the things that I'm about to tell you, but I'm going to tell you anyways. So one thing that I always talk about are the 5 most important things about me, just so you can get a little bit of an idea of what I am and what I'm about. But if you don't know about those things, here they are. So first and foremost, I'm a husband. My wife and I have been a team for almost 16 years, and we've been married for just over 10 of those years. And to be totally honest, she's way out of my league. I'm lucky to have nabbed her. Really quick, I love to show this picture. This is a picture from our wedding day that actually happened on December 26th in Minnesota. And there's a really great story behind the day after Christmas wedding. I'd be happy to tell you the whole story the next time that we're all in person together. When fingers are crossed, and we call it post-COVID time, and we can all get together in person. And like I said, I would love to tell you that story. It's a great one, but to be honest, I don't have time to tell it today. Another really important part of my life is that I'm a father. I'm actually a father of 4 little girls. Yes, you heard that right, 4 girls. And I cannot have a presentation without at least subjecting everyone to a few pictures of my kids. This is just kind of a little grouping of some of my favorite pictures of our kids over the last couple of years. And we just have a great time. They keep us on our toes, and we're always running around chasing after them. If you want more pictures of my kids, I would be happy to share those with you as well. So if you just let me know, I literally have thousands of them, and I'd be happy to show them to you. Once again, I can pull out my wallet or my phone next time we're all together post-COVID, and I'll show you a slideshow that will last, 3 or 4 hours. So earmark that time for when we're together next. Another really important part of my life that really kind of helped shape me to who I am today is that I'm a veteran of the United States Marine Corps. This is incredibly important for me because it was such a huge kind of point in my life in which I really kind of turned into the person that I am today and became what I am. Here's a quick picture of one of the teams that I worked with in Afghanistan. And during this deployment, we participated in an operation called Operation Mashtarak, which was later called the Battle of Marja. And it was the largest joint operation in the war in Afghanistan at the time. And it involved over 15,000 troops from 7 different nations. And it was really the culmination of an incredible amount of hard work and training. And I am so incredibly proud to have been a part of that operation. It really kind of was the cherry on top of our deployment. to Afghanistan. And some of the greatest people that I've ever worked with are featured in this picture, and they've all gone on to do incredible things, both within the military and outside of the military. Another important part, as you may guess, I'm a sterile processing professional. So I don't get the opportunity to spend as much time in the department as I used to because I have this role, right? I spend a lot of time doing other things as my job as a clinical education manager at Key Surgical, but really I love to go in and spend time in the department and really continue to immerse myself in some of the most incredible professionals that I've gotten to work with. Quick shout out to the University of Minnesota Surgery Centers and Clinics. That sterile processing team that I've worked with for a long time now is an incredible team. They have a great leader, Paul Sturbuck. They are kind of my second office away from my office, which is really great. And like I said, I don't get to spend as much time in there as I used to, but every single chance that I get, I like to go in and lend a helping hand in that department. So it's really great, and hopefully sometime soon I'll be back in there and I'll see you guys again. Here's a quick picture. We, at the University of Minnesota, we have centralized reprocessing of our flexible endoscopes, as well as servicing 8 ORs and all of the clinics and other departments within that facility. So we get to do a lot of different things, which is super awesome. I really, truly enjoy being a part of that team there. And then finally, once again, obviously, I'm the clinical education manager, like Lynn said, at Key Surgical. And really, it's such an incredible opportunity for me to be able to do things like this. And really, most of what I do is leading a team of clinical educators to go out and promote best practices for sterile processing and for endoscopy and for the operating room. And I wanted to give a quick shout out to that team as well. I actually call them my dream team. They're a super awesome bunch. And normally we're out traveling to conferences and facilities to promote best practices. But obviously, in the midst of a global pandemic, we've been focusing on providing the same type of education and value to our industries virtually, kind of like we're doing today. So I wanted to give a shout out. I have an incredible, amazing team. I am blessed to work with them. And not only the clinical education team, but also the Key Surgical team as a whole. Not a day goes by that I don't think to myself, wow, I sure am lucky to work with such an outstanding group of people. And I'm extremely thankful to be a part of that team. Okay, so now to get into the collaboration station. So to start off on the topic of collaboration today, I want to talk about a really interesting human dynamic. So I don't know about you, but I am personally a huge fan of 80s action movies. So we're going to use them as a medium to explore this dynamic really quickly before we get into the nitty-gritty of collaboration, okay? So, I mean, let's think about a handful of top-notch action movies, some of my favorites, right? Movies like Commando with Arnold Schwarzenegger and Die Hard and Rambo and many others that are just like it. I mean, these were blockbuster movies, and I still love watching them even today. I mean, just last weekend I watched Commando, and it was great. But why do we, as people, as humans, like them? What do we love about them? I mean, there's a lot of different things that I personally like about them, and I'll admit they've got some great action scenes, and there's pyrotechnics, and they've got awesome one-liners and puns that are really fun to quote. But the one thing that they have in common is the one versus many dynamic. People love this dynamic because it's empowering. It makes us feel like we can conquer the world single-handedly. And if we wanted to or needed to, we could do it ourselves, right? So here's the spoiler alert. Another reason why people love that narrative is because it's a complete fantasy. The real world does not work that way. I mean, in the real world, John Matrix from Commando and John McClane from Die Hard and John Rambo, sidebar here, they were really, really creative with character first names in this genre too. All Johns. But they would have all failed miserably because one person cannot take over the world. One person can't do it all. And even if they could, collaboration makes impossible tasks possible and difficult tasks easier. So let's take a journey of collaboration to a place where seemingly impossible problems become possible through collaboration. And now we're going to be all aboard at the collaboration station. Let's get started. So before we go any further, I have to provide just a quick disclaimer. We do our due diligence to provide you with the best, most up-to-date research and information. But that being said, this presentation does not take the place of your facility policies or published guidelines or standards. So I just want to get that out there. This, like I said, we've done our due diligence, but at the same time, this does not take place of other things that we have in place to mandate and to drive our daily practice as well. Okay, so let's take a quick look at the objectives that we'll cover during this presentation. So first, we're going to define collaboration, and then we'll describe some of the differences between cooperation and collaboration. And then next, we'll talk about some research that supports the success of collaboration, and then we'll name 3 different tools that are used to achieve collaboration. And we'll list 3 different ways that we can be a proactive participant in collaboration. And then finally, we'll outline some different leadership styles that impact collaboration. And by the end of this, we will all have new insights and tools to help eliminate barriers and to help us have major successes in our departments through collaboration. Okay, so what is collaboration? It might seem really elementary to define collaboration because we kind of all know what it is, but it's really vital to start with the foundation before we can build upon it and truly gain insight into how we can improve our daily life through collaboration. So collaboration is defined as working together jointly, especially in an intellectual endeavor. Now, when I was talking about the creation of this presentation with Michelle, one of our clinical educators, she said collaboration is truly to co-labor, and that's by making a mutual effort. This definition is so simple, but it really perfectly communicates the essence of the word collaborate, while also emphasizing the importance of mutual effort between and within parties when collaborating. But really, to truly grasp the definition of collaboration, we also have to define cooperation, because oftentimes there's some confusion between these 2 words. So what is cooperation? Cooperation is defined as working with another or others to work in compliance. And really what this means is one person leads and the others do their part to help accomplish the goal. And that is different than collaboration, right? I mean, when we see these 2 images side by side, we can see that it can make a significant impact on how we understand the difference between collaboration and cooperation. Because in our lives, we use both of them all the time. They're both valuable in their own way. I mean, I like to think of collaboration being most useful when we're developing a strategy to solve a problem. And then on the other hand, cooperation is most useful when we're executing that strategy. So, for example, when your facility is developing or implementing a new manual cleaning policy, let's say, both collaboration and cooperation are needed. During the development phase, collaboration between sterile processing, the OR staff, and infection prevention is extremely valuable. But after the development phase is complete, that's when the cooperation model is needed for successful implementation. So everyone has very specific tasks to implement and to reinforce in this new policy. And without cooperation, the new policy would never be successful. And very often in the workplace, we think about generating or implementing new ideas or goals, and we visualize an image like the cooperation image. It's hierarchical. and everyone is doing their job to complete the list of tasks for that day that someone else came up with. But what if this isn't the best way? Can you imagine the possibilities if we applied collaboration more in the workplace? I mean, new cross-functional best practices, new tools and equipment, new instrument cleaning practices, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. What if we collaborated first and then we made changes second? We would have a radical opportunity to change our work practices for the better. It's amazing stuff. So in a recent TED Talk by Rebecca Love, who's an experienced nurse entrepreneur and the previous director of nurse innovation and entrepreneurship at the Northwestern School of Nursing, she stated, nurses do approximately 27 workarounds per shift. So that means 27 times in 8 to 12 hours, we're faced with an inefficiency, an inconvenience, or an illogical way to do something. So we do it differently. We make the items safe, and we save time, and we make it easier or more practical. And that's just nurses, okay? That's not even including all of the other healthcare professionals in that statistic. Isn't that crazy? Can you imagine how large the number would be if she had included all of the professions within healthcare? Now, what if we were able to share those innovative workarounds by collaborating before we rolled out new instruments or tools or technologies? And what if we were able to collaborate now on the things that aren't working? How much time and safety and energy would we actually save? Well, the good news is that we can do that. And that's part of what we're here to talk about today. In fact, I mean, teams of people have been working together for a common purpose. It's really been the centerpiece of the human social organization ever since our ancestors first banded together to raise families and defend their communities and hunt game. And really, human history is filled with stories of people and communities working together in groups to explore and achieve and conquer big things. The perfect example is prehistoric man and the woolly mammoth. Part of what historians and researchers are able to tell is that hunters from many communities banded together to hunt these large animals. And really, for generations, many scholars assumed that actually mammoth-human interaction was limited to human scavenging on deceased mammoths for fur and ivory and bone. But relatively new research published in 2019, it asserts that early man did in fact hunt mammoths. So here's what we know. The typical woolly mammoth was around 3 meters tall, which when compared to a 6-foot tall adult human is massive. And there's virtually no possible way that a single person could hunt and kill this extremely large creature with the tools and resources that were available at the time. I mean, further, the woolly mammoth weighed roughly 6 tons. That's 12,000 pounds. Okay, so who here has picked up a car off the ground? Probably no one. Or at least had to push one after it ran out of gas or had a mechanical problem or something like that. Now, the average car weighs roughly 4,000 pounds. So that means you would have to stack 3 cars on top of each other to equal the weight of one woolly mammoth. And to give you a better idea on how valuable one mammoth would be to a group of prehistoric humans, so I hunt whitetail deer in Minnesota where I live. And we're actually ramping up for the season opener in a couple weeks here. I'm actually doing some scouting of our hunting land this weekend. I'm going to go up there tomorrow, early in the morning. I'm actually not looking forward to waking up that early. But the average whitetail buck in Minnesota weighs about 170 pounds. And if I'm lucky enough to harvest a deer when I'm hunting, my family of 7 it replaces much of the meat that we eat with venison for the next couple months. And let me tell you, my kids love venison, so it goes fast. But it's incredible how much meat we can get from a 170-pound mammal. So a mammoth is about 70 times the size of a deer. and that one mammoth could likely provide food and other resources for more than 500 people. So what did early humans do? They put their different languages and culturals and personal differences aside, and they worked together to overcome a problem that was impossible to solve on their own. Just like we talked about before, collaboration can make the impossible tasks possible. Can you imagine the amount of planning and tracking and resources and time it took to hunt just one of these massive creatures? Early humans needed to collaborate to survive, but we have the luxury of collaborating with each other, not just to survive, but to thrive. And now this is just one example of multiple ways that humans have collaborated for generations and generations to achieve high goals, to overcome challenges, and once again, to achieve the impossible. It's crazy to think that we came from that, right? We really evolved to collaborate. Okay, so I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, Brandon, are two heads really better than one? I mean, we're all familiar with the two most dreaded words in school: group project. We all cringe when we hear those two words because we've all experienced this at some point or another. Group project actually meant that one or two people would do all the work, and the other group members would at best contribute really little value, or at worst, they might even work against the goal of the project. So let's look into some research about functioning in groups, and then we'll talk about how to successfully set up a collaborative group. Okay, so before we decide whether two heads are better than one, let's discuss a specific challenge that we see in many groups that is different, and that is the difference in volume and confidence between group members. So I think we've probably all experienced this before, but it's really common that when we get together in a group, there's at least one or more people who immediately are extremely vocal about the best way to achieve the goal. So this behavior can often be mistaken for what's called leadership emergence, which actually describes the process in which an individual is recognized as the leader within a group, when in fact, this is actually more correlated to personality traits associated with extroversion and outspokenness than it is correlated to leadership ability. So the question is, can collaboration be successful if someone like this is so outspoken? And luckily for everyone in that group, the answer is yes. So let's look into some of the research. In 2014, in an issue of the Journal of Experimental Psychology, 2 experiments that studied how group decisions are made were described. And in the first study, participants were given a problem, and they were asked to provide their answer and a justification for their answer. But they were not allowed to use confidence language, which are words like obviously or clearly. And after reading the other responses, they were given the opportunity to change their answer. So the research found that, in fact, participants were significantly more likely to change their answer when their answer was wrong and when they were provided with an argument for the correct answer. And that didn't matter whether they knew that that was the correct answer or not. So this really points to the impact that good arguments can have on our decision-making process, because they can change people's minds. People are not necessarily stuck, no matter how outspoken they are, in their ways. Now, in a subsequent experiment, participants were given a reasoning task individually, and then they were asked to formulate an answer, and then after providing their answer, their confidence with that answer, and the justification, they discussed those problems in groups of 3 to 5 until everyone agreed upon an answer. And the findings of the study were actually really interesting because all groups in the study chose the correct answer if at least one group member had solved the problem correctly individually. So together, these studies confirm that group decisions are driven by sound argumentation, statistical averaging, and social motivation, not the influence of strong personalities in a group. This is highly encouraging because studies like this can help us facilitate collaboration in the most effective way to achieve the best possible outcomes. So, second, we have to clarify whether two heads or more are actually better than one. So the short answer is yes, but there is a caveat. So in an article published in 1971, okay, I know what you're thinking. Yes, 1971, it's very old, but I implore you to read this. It's a really well-written and researched article, and it's incredibly relevant today. It's still excellent research. So the article was published in the Academy of Management Journal by Andrew H. Vandeven, who is an American organizational scholar and a professor in the Carlson School of Management at the University of Minnesota. So he and his friend and fellow professor, Andre Delbeck, researched and detailed literature surrounding group work. They researched processes and problem-solving committees. And here's what they found. So two heads in a group are actually better than one. But like I said, the caveat is that two independent heads are better than one group of two heads. Does that make sense to everybody? So two heads are better than one as long as they're thinking independently. So their research concluded that allowing group members to independently review and process the information, respond with rationale, and then come together to decide where they found the most successful group interactions. In fact, more research shows that people in groups perform better than independent people in achieving correct or successful outcomes. And all of these studies have common threads. First, group members should independently assess the information provided and generate their own original ideas and responses. So essentially, each member needs time to review and process the information before they enter the group and then start discussing. They need a working knowledge of the issue at hand and an initial subjective estimation. And then second, there should be a structured feedback and interacting discussion. Third, they suggest that the group voting should be completed independently and not publicly in the group, or final independent individual judgments should be made. So these are great considerations when we reflect on previous collaborations and for future collaborative goals. So let's take a look at 8 suggested steps to ensure the optimal collaboration success. Okay, so here are the how-to steps for collaborating, and they were taken from a document published by the University of Minnesota in 2006 that was entitled The Design and Implementation of Cross-Sector Collaborations, Propositions from the Literature. So this article was written and published in the Public Administration Review, which is a journal for practitioners, scholars, and trainers interested in the public sector and in public sector management. So the research really provides guidelines for successful collaboration, and these are really well researched and clear. They created cross-sector public health crisis planning and preparation. And although hospital departments such as the OR and SPD do not often manage cross-sector public health crises, these are tools that are comprehensive and effective for large and small collaboration, and they can really provide an outline to how to begin to achieve successful collaboration. So the first step is to forge an initial agreement. What is this collaboration and what is our goal? Informal ideas and agreements about the collaboration can really begin to, can make up the goals, and the processes can be okay in some instances, but formal, objective, and documented agreements they really have the advantage of supporting accountability for success. So next is to build leadership. So collaboration offers multiple opportunities for formal and informal leaders to gain experience, to reveal themselves, and really to shine. So, for example, I've had the opportunity to be in collaborative groups throughout my career, and really those groups were where not only did I learn about other parts of the organization and other processes, but really it allowed me the opportunity to help share my expertise as well as my goals in the process. So whether or not you have the opportunity to participate in collaborative groups today, it should be something that you do in the future or that you strive for, because it really gives you the opportunity to provide the format for you to build on your leadership capabilities. The next step is to build legitimacy. So in order for a collaboration, along with many other things, they're a great way to kind of build and build this legitimate process, right? So it's really a way to build legitimacy and to gain respect from other people that you're working with, like I mentioned in the leadership portion. And this is really where you start to build those relationships, you build the legitimacy, and that allows you to say, hey, these are the resources that we need, and this is the support that we need. And this can be built in part by the group members and their affiliations and relationships, but it's also largely affected by the next tool, which is building trust. So many researchers realize that collaborations begin with varying degrees of trust, both within themselves, but also within a larger group. So emphasizing that trust building is an ongoing requirement is really an important step for a successful collaboration. Throughout the lifetime of the collaboration and throughout the lifetime of these collaborative groups, collaboration partners will build trust by sharing information, by sharing knowledge, and by demonstrating competency and good intentions. And then when they follow through, they celebrate. They celebrate small wins together, and that builds trust within the group. And the more trust that you can build, the more collaboration that you'll be able to entrust. So, in the words of Francis Fry, it is my belief that trust is the foundation we do. And in the new book, Unleashed, she and her wife, Ann Morris, describe their experiences by transforming leaders and companies through trust, which is built on authenticity, logic, and empathy. Building trust is a huge part of this process, and without trust, collaboration is doomed. So what's next? Next is to manage conflict. So tell me a situation in which multiple people work to discover and implement a solution together, and I will tell you a story of learning conflict resolution. These collaborations give us a ton of opportunity to share our feelings and to share our opinions, but that also creates an environment for conflict. So this is expected, right? Conflict and collaboration emerges for multiple reasons. It can be a healthy, productive part of collaboration if it's managed swiftly and respectably. Ideally, the boundaries for respect and behavior will be set before the conflict arises, and then we can use those boundaries as a guide to resolution. So it's really important that not only we set up these conflict resolution boundaries prior to starting the collaboration, but also trusting them throughout the process and utilizing those as a tool. All right, so the next step is planning. So this is when you formulate your plans, but hold them loosely. It's really important because there are two plans to keep in mind. So one is a deliberate plan, and that is careful and articulation of the mission goals and of the objectives. And the second kind are emergent plans. So this approach argues that a clear understanding of mission, goals, and roles and action steps are more likely to emerge over time as conversations involving individuals, groups, and organizations grow to encompass a broader network of involved or affected parties. So something that we discover within our own team is that it's important not to let emergent plans overhaul the purpose of the collaboration. It's really vital to evaluate the issue or the plan that has come up and decide if it is under the umbrella of the current goal or if it should be isolated and used to create a new collaboration or the next collaboration, the next project. So if you try to bite off more than you can chew by taking on all of these new ideas and new collaborations, then within one group, really what happens is what I call scope creep, right? The project becomes so big that no progress can be made and all of the motivation can be lost because you're not having those small wins and you're not gaining progress, excuse me. So the next step is to create a structure. Structures are likely to become dynamic because of the ambiguity and complexity that's inherent in collaborations, right? This is, this ambiguity arises from many features of membership, including the perceptions of who belongs in the collaboration, the social interactions between collaborators, and who and what each member represents. So, for example, if a surge tech is representing in the OR and sterile processing tech are representing in sterile processing and an infection preventionist is representing the IP field, and then if there are turnover among those members of the group within those respective areas, that can create a lot of confusion and ambiguity because more people are coming in and more people are providing new information. So it's really important to continue to have structure in that involvement. And each collaboration will have a detailed yet structure that will be transparent and dynamic. Those are the important parts. We need to have the structure up front so that when these new things come up, we can understand where they fit. And finally, governance. So is your collaborative group going to meet regularly? Are we going to meet formally or informally? Does that change depending on what status the project is at? Will only a few members meet each time as representative of a larger group? Will there be contingencies such as network size and the degree of trust among members can really influence which form is appropriate? And leadership choice is critical for matching the best outcome to form those conditions. So those are really 8 great tools for success, but there's also a few significant ways that collaboration can be ruined. So first, working in silos. I think that everyone loves to think that, oh, you know what, I don't work in a silo. I really want to be collaborative. You know, we just need everyone else to not work in their silos. And really, this is that age-old phrase of, that's not my job. Or maybe you're only thinking through the decisions from a very narrow perspective of how it affects only your department. So there's no point in collaborating if we continue to point fingers and place blame on other people when we're not taking responsibility for a piece of the greater pie. Really, as cliche as it may sound, it is all of our jobs to collaborate. And there are so many stories and incidences where empowering each person from the OR nurse to the housekeeper to sterile processing to infection prevention has saved a patient's life, literally. And we can all agree that the more that we know, the better that we can all prepare and protect our patients. Second is lack of training. So not having proper training should not prevent you from participating in collaboration. Or it should not prevent you from being confident that you are a valuable member of the collaborative process. Because not having training is actually a perfect place to start. You can learn what training you need, and that can give you an opportunity to gain experiences. And oftentimes, many new healthcare professionals that I've had the opportunity to help train have really been the ones that have opened my eyes to new ideas. Oh, tongue twister. But to stretch me and to teach me so that I'm getting training from the person that I'm training. It's really incredible. So this lack of training actually never ends, because you can never have too much training. So next is hierarchy. So nothing will shut down the creative process and productivity faster than having an extremely rigid hierarchy. There is a time and a place for them, but in a collaboration, ensuring that this doesn't defeat the group is really, really important. Because if we have this rigid hierarchy where one person has the final say in the collaboration, that's going to cause other people to not speak up, because they may think, well, if I share my opinion, whoever's in charge is just going to tell me no anyways. And finally, a lack of trust. Again, there's nothing that we do personally or professionally that is not affected by trust. In and out of the group is really important. We need to be trustworthy. Do what you say, and then say what you do. And then admit it when you're wrong. Apologize and keep confidence. This is what I always talk about in taking ownership, because you need to be able to say, yes, that was my idea. It turns out it wasn't a great idea, but this is what we're going to do to fix it next time. And you would think that having an idea that doesn't pan out perfectly may actually hurt your trust with your collaboration partners. But when you own up to it and you come up with a solution to help build that trust again, that is exactly what it'll do. It will build the trust. It will not harm the trust. And at the end of the day, if you can't be trusted, you will not be successful, you won't be promotable, and you also won't be considered for other opportunities. Trust, I cannot stress it enough, trust is so incredibly important within any personal or professional relationship. So throughout my career in the military and healthcare fields, I have worked for many types of leaders. There were leaders who pushed me and gave me opportunities to be better, people who worked with me for years and still didn't know my name, and to be completely honest, leaders that I wish never knew my name at all. And there are certain prevailing leadership styles that are really common. They're recognizable, and honestly, some of them, they're not going anywhere. And it's really common to hear people in healthcare say, you know what, I have a great idea, but leadership says. So let's take a look at some of the common leadership styles, the pros and the cons, and then discuss a way to help when working towards collaboration with these types of leaders. So it's important to state that we can't put any individual leader or participant into one of these boxes. While your leaders or you may exhibit many of the qualities that align with one of these leadership styles, no person is all one thing or nothing of another. So we'll take a look at each of the different styles, both good and bad. Okay, so first we'll talk about the Autocratic leadership style. And this is also called the Authoritarian leadership style. These leaders are direct. I mean, that's one of the actual advantages of this type of leadership. They're direct. There's no guessing if you're doing your part correctly or incorrectly with this leader in the group. And they'll certainly let you know. Another pro is that typically these leaders have expectations that are very clear and they stand up front. It may be, you will carry the phone throughout this shift and you'll begin training on another topic next Thursday on the evening shift. And finally, these leaders are very decisive. There will be no wherever you want to eat conversation with this leader. It will be, we're going to this restaurant that I chose because I chose it, because it's the best one. Now, a few cons of this leadership style are when collaborating, they're very controlling, decisive, and these leaders tend to crush morale and creativity, which really limits the idea and solution generation process. And also, attempting to collaborate with an authoritative leader can be isolating and frustrating because you feel like you're never getting heard. So participative leadership, which is also called democratic leadership, is another really interesting leadership style. A lot of people can associate with this because democratic leaders are often, they associate with offering guidance to group members, but they also participate in the group and they allow input from other group members. So some of the pros for this is creativity is high under a participative leader. Each member is encouraged to freely share their thoughts and their ideas freely, but there are some cons. So the cons for this is that it may take participative leaders to a long time to finalize a decision because they're taking into account every single person's opinion, whether it's a good opinion or a bad opinion. So for example, if 5 people share their opinion and only 1 can be chosen, it can take a really long time to decide. And finally, minority or individual opinions may be overridden or overlooked by the group majority. So no matter what the value is in this, in their idea, because there are more people that think a different way, it could have a bad impact on individuality. So the laissez-faire leadership. So delegative leadership is a very hands-off leadership style. So this type of leader is really excellent at offering autonomy and resources and advice, but these types of leaders usually lack decisive decision-making, and they often have groups that have unclear roles that lead to a lack of productivity and motivation. That's really an interesting part because many people love having a leader who's kind of this laissez-faire style because they say, hey, I'm allowed to do everything that I want. I have a lot of autonomy. But then they also have a real lack of decisiveness within that group. So the transformative leader is kind of the newest type of leadership from our discussion today. The pros of this leadership are often that leaders practice what they preach. They're more than just being involved in the discussion. They often serve as a role model for leadership through exhibiting actions that align with their beliefs. And these leaders are known to spend a significant amount of time considering the needs and the strengths and the weaknesses of an individual. And these leaders are also often associated with the highest level of productivity. But there are some cons. In some cases, groups may require a more managerial or autocratic style that involves closer control and greater direction, particularly in situations where group members are inexperienced or they don't have the skills required to do the job. They may need a lot of oversight. Okay, so the leadership styles are not going anywhere, and we may not have covered every single leadership style in this presentation, but these leadership styles, it's important to acknowledge that they can actually help you achieve your success in collaboration. Authoritarian or autocratic leaders respect honesty and boundaries, and they celebrate victory. So do not compete with participative or democratic leadership. You have to have clear goals and deadlines and be conscious and consciously notice the majority versus the minority when you're working with participative leaders. For laissez-faire leaders, it's really important to ask for objective expectations and deadlines, to know your team, and to get a partner or mentor. And with transformative leaders, it's awesome to have a great mentor or partner to request specific direction if something is unclear, because that's a common problem with this type of leader, and to restate the broader mission or goal if you find that the group is getting hung up on the details. These are all great ways to ensure success with these different types of leaders. So it's really important that we also talk about overcoming bullying bosses, because according to a lot of research that's out there, there's some really staggering statistics. And this is actually published in Forbes magazine in July of 2019, that 61% of bullies are bosses who operate alone. And also 61% of employees are aware of abusive conduct in the workplace. So either they have experienced it or they're aware that it's happening. Another really important statistic here is that 65% of bullied employees lose their jobs. So what can we do? First, bullying can sometimes be challenging to notice and hard to address, but it's really vital to give yourself permission to call out bullying. So not only should you observe, but you should document. You have to establish boundaries with the person that's bullying. And if those boundaries aren't set, it's really important to make sure they're set before confronting this person. Now, if you're not comfortable confronting this person directly, it's really important that you go and earn support from others that are observing or experiencing this bullying as well. And then if that's not working and you're hitting a dead end, make sure that you are able to go to the next senior ranking person above them. And if you're not making traction, just continue to have meetings with this person one-on-one. But if you are gaining traction, continue to have meetings with this person. But if you aren't gaining traction, you need to stop meeting with this person and involve someone else in the communication loop. These are really important steps if you're experiencing bullying, especially if it's coming from someone who is your superior. So we've talked a lot about collaboration and cooperation and different leadership styles. And now that we have a kind of level set knowledge on each of these, which is best? What type of leader should leaders be? Is cooperation for the birds? Should we not have laissez-faire leadership? Should everyone be a transformative leader? Well, the short answer is no. Because like we discussed over the last few slides, there are advantages and disadvantages to every leadership style, and most leaders don't fit squarely into one specific box. But the truth is that all leaders have the ability to adapt their leadership style, to take and adopt it from different paths, and also take different parts from each of the styles of leadership to help lead their team. But I can also tell you this, leaders should be, no matter what style is best, they should be doing what is best for their team. And that, if that is their number one goal, then they will be successful no matter what their style is, period. So here are some easy takeaways. What can we do when you walk back into your room, your floor, or your unit? So leaders, first, I'm going to address you. As a leader, the last thing that your employee wants to hear from you is, well, that's the way it is, or that's the way it's always been. And it's really important because there's nothing more defeating than hearing that. What it sounds like is, I don't care about your concerns. Do your job and don't bother me. Instead, truly consider what it would take to make this change and communicate that with your employee. What would be required? Maybe their concern is actually something different and you could make a change. Listen, repeat for understanding, and practice transparency around what is required to find a solution. Consider your audience and timing, your word choice, and discussion, because if you take responsibility and you are transparent with your team, then you're investing to be dependable and trustworthy, and you can make it fun. So this is really important because we can be trustworthy and we can make changes be fun instead of be a big problem, right? Especially, it's important when changes come up to not take it personal, right? You have to be an owner of that process and you say, hey, you know what? That's a great idea. Now this is what it would take to achieve that goal. So for the individuals, this is what you can do. Take care of yourself, right? Practice yes. Say, it's important to learn to say no so that you can say yes. It seems a little funny, but you have to practice active complaining. So when things come up, you have to tell people, this is what's going on and this is what we need to change, but here is a solution to come up with it. So it's really also important to be trustworthy as well. You need to be trustworthy in order for your manager or for your leaders to trust that you can help solve the problem and be collaborative. And you also have to be willing to start. You need to prepare now for tomorrow and prepare the leader that you want to be. You have to be willing to start. So as cheesy as this sounds, success requires all different kinds of teamwork and leadership styles. I love this. Once again, my coworker Michelle says that if you have the opportunity to use a cheesy 90s wall art, then you should definitely use it. But seriously, we each bring a unique perspective and expertise to the table, and we can find a creative solution to a problem that has been constantly challenging us. It's the more that we collaborate, the stronger that the relationships between the collaborators become. And the next thing you know, you're collaborating in different ways than you ever imagined. It's really important to collaborate to overcome these challenges. So it sounds like that's kind of a fairy tale, but realistically, we can build relationships. And, I hear stories like this all the time from all over the country that there's a perfect relationship that's built through trust and collaboration between infection prevention and sterile processing, between sterile processing and the operating room and many other departments. But really, the big piece that's missing from that fairy tale story is all the hard work that it takes to build a relationship like the one that I just described. It's not easy, but it is worth it. That's all I have today for you. And I think we're going to have an opportunity to go through a couple questions here for the last few minutes. So I'm going to pass it off to Linz, and she'll be moderating for some questions.
Wonderful, Brandon. Thank you so much for bringing a healthy dose of energy and motivation and insight to leaders and frontline technicians alike who want to collaborate. We did have a couple of questions come through. The first of which says, is there any self-assessment tools available to check our leadership style, or how do I determine what leadership style I have?
Yeah, that's a great question. So there are lots of different tools out there. I don't particularly prescribe to one, but one really great way that you can kind of mold yourself into one of these boxes or see which traits that you have are actually by taking personality assessments. And there's lots of great personality assessments out there. And you can take a look at these and you can say, okay, my personality fits within this. And that really says that I would be best at this type of leadership. But like I said, I don't know of any really great ones that will put you into a box because, like I mentioned, we don't all fit squarely into a single box.
All right. Next question. How can I help our department be more collaborative when my manager makes all the decisions without consulting anyone?
I think that this is probably a question that we all have at some point or other, right? Because we've all run into that person. And like I said before, when we're talking about the leadership styles, that autocratic leadership style, it's really challenging to come up with a way to help collaborate. I think that the most important thing is to build the trust with that leader, because the more trust that we build with that leader, the more opportunities that they're going to take, and they're going to look at us and say, wow, that person is doing their job really well. They've got lots of great ideas. You know what? Maybe it's time that we bring them into the decision-making process. The other piece that you can really do is you can start to collaborate at a lower level and collaborate with your peers and show that your boss, who is not normally, really gung-ho about collaboration, and show them the value of collaborating. So show them, hey, we had this problem. We came up with a collaborative solution, and then present that to your manager and say, hey, this is what we came up with. It was so valuable to have us all in the room because we had great perspectives.
Great advice. This next question says, is it possible to adopt diverse leadership styles depending on the situation at hand?
Yeah, you know what? That's something that we didn't talk about in this presentation, but I would argue that that we all adapt and change the way that we act and the way that we lead depending on the situation. Because, like I said, when I say that no individual fits squarely into one of these leadership style boxes, we can take individual tools from each of these, and hopefully we're taking from the pros section and not the cons section, right? But we can take those pros and add them into our own toolbox to be used at different times, depending on what the situation is. The really important part is to really practice identifying what the situation is. So you have to be really observant to be able to make that stretch and to be able to say, hey, in this situation, I think it's going to be best for me to be more direct and to be more autocratic because there needs some more direction in this particular situation. So I think that it's definitely possible to adapt a diverse leadership style depending on the situation. But the most important piece is you have to have the tools in your toolbox in order to be flexible.
I love that. This next question says, the OR and sterile processing departments don't work well together in my facility. How can we collaborate if we hate each other?
You know what? I think this is another one that we hear as well. So I think that the important part is, once again, to start to build that trust and build that relationship. When you don't get along with another department and all you do is spend your time butting heads with each other, it's really important that you take the first steps and to, like I said in one of the last slides, is you have to be active and you have to take the first step. So the important part is you going out and trying to bridge that gap and build the relationship. Because right now, if there's no relationship there, or if there's a bad relationship, the only way that you can fix it is by doing things together. You can't stay in your silos and continue to work that way and expect to build that relationship and to be able to collaborate in the future if you don't start now.
Great advice. That is all the time that we have today. There were a couple of additional questions that did come through, and I will make sure to get those to Brandon so that, Brandon, you can address those directly via email. If any of you have additional questions that come up later today, maybe later this weekend, and you think, I wish I would have asked Brandon that question, feel free to come back to this session because it will be available on demand, and you'll find all of his contact information in the speaker bio tool on the right-hand side of your screen. Brandon, thank you so much. It's a pleasure to work with you again. Thank you for bringing, like I said, a healthy dose of both energy, motivation, and also insight on working together across the continuum of care. There will be a short 15-minute break between this session and the next. We are so glad you're here, and we look forward to seeing you in the next session. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.